Shalom, Israel, grace and blessings from God the Father and our Lord Jesus Christ be unto you. All praise to the Most High that we made it another week learning the Word. And sorry for the slight tardiness. I'm just trying to get everything set up. I really want to make it through the 12 tribes breakdown this week, and we got a lot to cover. Mainly the specific tribal breakdowns in prophecy. But also, you got to learn the history to know where the prophecy came to pass. So, with that, it looks like I'm good on this end. I will check to see how we're doing on the viewers end. Make sure everything is functioning properly. So y'all please bear with me for a second. Let's see. Let's make sure that everything's going good on this end. Let's see. Where are we at? Are we live? Let's see. We appear to be live. All praise to the Most High for that. All right. Are we live? All right. So we're good on YouTube. Let's see about Facebook. We should be good on there. Things going good on this end. Okay. All praises to the Most High. All right. Yeah, we about to get started. All right. So let me go ahead and bring this down. And there's one thing I forgot to pull up. Shoot. Y'all bear with me for a second while I get this pulled up. Because I would like to just prove this before I get into it. Because I just want to touch on specifically what we had read here. And it already saved my page. Praise the Most High. So yeah, we can go ahead and get into it. I didn't realize it would pull it up that quickly. Praise the Most High. But I do want to start with, let me turn this way. Straighten myself up a little bit. There we go. All right, all praise to the Most High. I will start, as we always start, with 2 Timothy 2 and 15. 2 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 15. 2 Timothy 2 and verse 15. It says, "Study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth." And that is very important, to rightly divide the word of truth. That's what I'm trying to do. Lord's will, y'all will be able to do that as you learn the word as well. So from there, let's go ahead and get started with this first little excerpt. I just want us to remember from last week. We had mentioned Reuben, but we didn't really necessarily go into it. We didn't necessarily go into Reuben. So this excerpt here from the book called Lost Tribes and Promised Lands. All right. There's a few things that I want y'all to remember from this book. All right. Just keep this in mind because we're about to get into it. All right. You had this Portuguese Marano, whose name was Antonio de Montesinos. All right. He knew a quote unquote Indian from South America who had said that we so badly treated a holy people, the greatest in the world. Right. So the Indian said we treated a holy people very badly. All right. And then he went on to say, Francisco, one of the Indian guides, had declared that his countrymen would be avenged upon the Spaniards in time anyway, by means of a people now hidden. All right. So he said, look, hey, we will be avenged. We will be judged. We are being judged now, but we will return. Right. That's what the Indian said. And then Montesinos put it together when he said, those Indians, they are Hebrews, right? So he put it together that the Indians in general, all right, are Hebrews. All right. Francisco specifically said that, hey, we had mistreated a holy people, right? And you go on down through on page 364. On page 364, it says, they told him, right, the specific people that they had treated badly. Francisco later shows these people to Montesinos, and they greet him in Hebrew, right? Said, Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Ehad, right? Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. That specific group of people that the general Indians in Venezuela had mistreated, they were of the tribe of Reuben. All right. However, and they also said that the tribe of Joseph lived on an island nearby. So how would they know that Joseph was in the Caribbean unless they themselves had traveled through the Caribbean? I specifically mentioned this last week as far as like that was a remnant of Reuben in Venezuela. The bulk of the tribe of Reuben was not in Venezuela. All right. However, the bulk of the tribe of Reuben at that time was in the continental U.S. All right. In Florida, they had traveled by boat down through, the Caribbean for whatever reason. And so now let's get to the history and prophecy of the tribe of Reuben specifically. All right. That's all I wanted y'all to keep in mind, that the Indians in general were Hebrews, were Israelites, as Montesinos himself come to that conclusion. However, the Indians who were in Venezuela knew that they weren't the same as the Reubenites. All right. So, let's get this here. In Genesis 49, let's get back to Genesis 49. Because Genesis 49 talks about where the tribes would be in the last days. All right. Where the tribes would be in the last days, right? So let's get this here. Talking about Reuben. This is Jacob blessing his sons, as it says right there at the top. Reuben, thou art my firstborn, my might, and the beginning of my strength, the excellency of dignity, and the excellency of power. All right? So as you see here, and of course it didn't keep this on here. Let me move all these over here if I can. But the 12 tribes chart shows Reuben as being the Seminole or Creek family. And that is absolutely correct. And we're about to get into the Seminole Wars where this prophecy was fulfilled. All right, where you see Reuben here. Creek family, Indians, Seminole, Choctaw, Muskogee is also in there as well. So let's get into the Seminole Wars real quick. This is the Department of State, Florida.gov. All right. So this isn't like some this isn't some Hebrew Israelite source. Obviously, this isn't even a like Seminole source. This is from Florida themselves. After the American Revolution, and you get to the wars from 1776 to 1783, Spain regained control of Florida from Britain as part of the Treaty of Paris. When the British evacuated Florida, Spanish colonists as well as settlers from the newly formed U.S. came pouring in. Many of these new residents were lured by favorable Spanish terms for acquiring property called land grants. Right, so that's was commonly done by colonial governments at the time. All right. Even Seminoles were encouraged to set up farms because they provided a buffer between Spanish Florida and the United States. Escaped slaves also entered Florida, trying to reach a place where their U.S. masters had no authority over them. Right. So the runaway slaves from the plantations in the U.S. in places like Georgia and South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, they would flee to Florida, all right, to live among the Seminoles, all right. Instead of becoming more Spanish, Florida increasingly became more American, all right. So, again, the Seminoles and the escaped slaves, they knew they were brothers, right? They got along as brothers. They didn't fight one another. they lived together. All right. Back when Britain controlled Florida, the British often incited Seminoles against American settlers who were migrating south into Seminole territory. These old conflicts, combined with the safe haven Seminoles provided black slaves, caused the U.S. Army to attack the tribe in the First Seminole War from 1817 to 1818, which took place in Florida and southern Georgia. Forces under General Andrew Jackson invaded Spanish Florida, attacked several key locations, and pushed the Seminoles farther south into Florida. And as you see by the, I don't know if y'all can see that photo here, or it's a drawing rather, but it says that 2 Seminole chiefs or Micos are captured by Jackson's forces, who used the ruse of flying the British flag to lure the Indians to them, right? So Andrew Jackson just went down there being the madman that he was, and he was a man of war. He was a valiant man, if that's the word you want to use for him. But he deceived the Seminoles, and that's how he beat them in battle. All right. It says, finally, after several official and unofficial U.S. military expeditions into the territory, Spain formally ceded Florida to the U.S. in 1821, according to the terms of the Adams-Onis Treaty. As soon as the U.S. acquired Florida, it began urging the Indians there to leave their lands and relocate along with other southeastern tribes to Indian Territory, present-day Oklahoma, right? So they, just like all the rest of the tribes, they try to get them on the Trail of Tears, right? They say, hey, the Indian Removal Act, hey, y'all going to one area, y'all going to Oklahoma, right? Some Seminole leaders signed a treaty in 1832, and part of the tribe moved. But other Seminoles refused to recognize the treaty and fled into the Florida Everglades, right? So even this here, as far as the Seminole leaders signing a treaty, it said part of the tribe moved. Listen to this next sentence. It says, the Treaty of Payne's Landing, signed by a small number of Seminoles in 1832, required Indians to give up their Florida lands within 3 years and move west. When the U.S. Army arrived in 1835 to enforce the treaty, the Indians were ready for war. You see that right there? So this is the only instance of the quote-unquote Indians breaking the treaty first, right? Because America, you read the history about how the America made treaties with all the tribes. America is the one who's always breaking the treaties, right? And I suppose the British did it before them as well, and the French. But this is the only instance where the Indians, they signed the treaty and they were like, no, we ain't going nowhere. All right, that was a ruse. That was to buy us some time. So even when it said part of the tribe moved, not really, not many at all. All right, they signed that treaty in 1832 as a ruse. All right, again, back to the prophecy in Genesis 49. He said, Reuben, thou art my firstborn, my might, and the beginning of my strength. Right. So the warfare tactics of Reuben are unlike any other tribe, as in they got down. All right, we're about to read in the Second Seminole War. Hey, they got down with the U.S. Government. They did not go peacefully. They did not roll over. All right, and when it says the excellency of dignity and the excellency of power, it's interesting here when he says the excellency of dignity. All right, because when it comes to some other quote unquote Indian tribes, what was known as the quote-unquote civilized tribes, they were not helping escaped slaves, all right? Even the opposite, right? They, in some cases, like I believe it's George Washington had a Indian tracker who worked for him to catch his runaway slave named James Seagrove. I have to look into that. I got a book that talks about it. But Reuben was not like that. Reuben was providing a safe haven for the escaped slaves because they're the excellency of dignity according to prophecy. All right. Unstable as water. All right. Unstable as water. As in, yeah, you signed this treaty with me. I don't care. He said, I don't care. That was a ruse. All right. Yeah. We signed this treaty. We don't care. that's the instability that he's talking about here. All right. So, reading into the Second Seminole War, it says, hold on, wait a minute. When the U.S. Army arrived in 1835 to enforce the treaty, the Indians were ready for war. As Major Francis Dade marched from Fort Brooke toward Fort King, 180 Seminole warriors led by Micanopy, Alligator, and Jumper attacked. Only one man of that army detachment survived the ambush. You see that right there? So they sent a whole platoon to them. They had 180 people. And they said only, one man of the U.S. Army survived that attack. All right? As it says here, the campaigns of the Second Seminole War were an outstanding demonstration of guerrilla warfare by the Seminoles. So, again, this is not a Seminole site. This is the Florida government who wrote this. They said, like, we're impressed. All right? It was impressive. The warfare tactics, right? Again, the prophecy is my might, the might of Jacob was in his firstborn Reuben, the beginning of his strength, the excellency of power. All right? This is what they said here. They said, an outstanding demonstration of guerrilla warfare by the Seminole. The Micos, Jumper, Alligator, Micanopy, and Osceola, leading less than 3,000 warriors, were pitted against 4 U.S. generals and more than 30,000 troops. All right? The Second Seminole War, this was from 1835 to 1842. All right? So the First Seminole War, it's hardly even a war. All right? It's from a year or two, from 1817 to 1818, however you want to look at that. All right? And Andrew Jackson won it by deception. All right? So it's not like a full-scale battle. The Second Seminole War really shows what kind of warriors the Seminoles were. All right. Let's see. The U.S. spent more than $20 million fighting the Seminoles. The war left more than 1,500 soldiers and uncounted American civilians dead. All right. So it was again, power, the might, the strength. All right. And the obvious duplicity of the U.S. government's tactics marred Indian-white relations throughout the country for future generations. You see that right there. So this is where, when the U.S. government was fighting the Seminole Wars, that's when they really learned to play dirty, basically, in warfare tactics. All right. As the hostilities dragged on, frustrated U.S. forces increasingly turned to desperate measures to win the war. For example, Osceola was captured and imprisoned when he met with U.S. troops who had called for a truce and claimed to want to talk peace. All right. So this is where you get that, this is a prophecy here about the wicked, right? And again, the deceitful tactics, all right? As it said there, they were getting desperate because they were losing, all right? In Psalms 55, let me pull this up real quick. I didn't have this in mind, but since we're getting into it. Psalms 55. And I think it's verse 20. Where is that? Yes. So this is in general, when dealing with when the U.S. was dealing with Indian tribes. Psalms 55 and 20, he hath put forth his hands against such as be at peace with him. He has broken his covenant, right? So all the broken covenants that I mentioned. The words of his mouth were smoother than butter, but war was in his heart. That's what I was thinking of when it comes to what we were reading here, as far as he was coming for truce and wanting to talk peace, right? The Miko, Osceola, right? The leader of the people. He was called for truce and peace talks, right? But as I said here, war was in his heart. His words were softer than oil, yet were they drawn swords. All right. So let's see. Let's go back to it. With Osceola in prison, the U.S. was confident the war would end soon, but it did not. Although Osceola died in prison in 1838, other Seminole leaders kept the battle going for a few more years. You see that right there? You get rid of one, we're just going to replace him and keep moving. All right. In 1842, a nominal end to the hostilities arrived, though no peace treaty was ever signed. There was never a peace treaty to end the Seminole Wars. All right. By this time, most Seminoles had been moved from Florida, relocated to Indian Territory, today's Oklahoma. Right, so most Indian tribes, right, which were of Gad instead of Reuben, they signed peace treaties, and the U.S. Went against them and broke them, but they still ended up signing treaties, right? The Seminoles were not so. The only treaty that they signed, some of them signed, not even all of them, but some of them signed it as a ruse, right? That's the only situation where Indians broke the treaty first, right? As I said, in let's see. In 1842, a nominal end to the hostilities arrived, though no peace treaty was ever signed. By this time, most Seminoles had been moved from Florida, relocated to Indian Territory, today's Oklahoma. Right, so I'll read this and then I'll talk more about this part right here, the end of the Second Seminole War. I'll talk about the third one real quick and then we'll call it an end of this article. A third Seminole War broke out in 1855 when conflicts largely over land arose between whites and some Seminoles who remained in Florida. Constant military patrols and rewards for the capture of Indians reduced the Seminole population to about 200 when the Third Seminole War ended in 1858, right? So, again, that's prophecy. But when it comes to the, like you see the time period, 1858, that was like right before the Civil War, whenever the Third Seminole War ended. But anyway, when it comes to relocating to the Indian Territory, and I'll probably place a clip here whenever I start editing this and start putting them all together into one lesson. And that's going to be hours and hours. Obviously, this is like 4 weeks worth of classes. I'm going to try to put it all together. But I'll put a clip here that I've seen concerning John Horse specifically, was one of the leaders that I talked about here. Other Seminole, it says, although Osceola died in prison in 1838, other Seminole leaders kept the battle going for a few more years. John Horse is an example of one of those Seminole leaders. He led the people in fighting and in battles, and he was basically pitched the idea of like, hey, you can leave the U.S. and go to Indian Territory and live among your brethren, and you won't have to worry about the U.S. anymore. He got there, he saw that it was not a hospitable land to live in at the time, right? And he went and took pretty much all the rest of the Seminoles and they went down into Mexico, all right? John Horse and the Seminoles were the only tribe to really agree to walk on the Trail of Tears. And they didn't walk, they rode horses, all right? So again, the excellency of dignity, the excellency of power, the might of Jacob. They weren't forced to walk the Trail of Tears like all the rest of the tribes were. They chose to, because they were kind of, sold this idea that they could be free there. And once they found out that was not the case, they left and went to Mexico. And that's where a lot of Reuben is still in northeastern Mexico to this day. But others, as they were walking the Trail of Tears, just like all the other Indian tribes, they settled in parts of Tennessee and Georgia and Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas along the way. And there's still some Seminoles in Oklahoma to this day as well. So from there, I do want to get Deuteronomy 33 concerning Reuben. I guess I'll finish out this again in Genesis 49. Reuben, thou art my firstborn, my might in the beginning of my strength, the excellency of dignity, and the excellency of power. Unstable as water, thou shalt not excel. Understand that thing. Reuben, and he goes on to explain, because thou went up to thy father's bed, then defiled thou it. He went up to my couch, right? Reuben had sex with his stepmother, right? So that's why he did not receive the birthright, and he did not receive the kingdom either. He was not, the Reubenites did not become the kings in ancient Israel, all right? Because of that. It passed from him because Jacob was disgusted by his actions, right? And he also said, thou shalt not excel, right? Reubenites are not prominent. They weren't prominent in ancient Israel, not really. They had, they're mighty men, of course. Just like I'm mentioning, the Seminole and their wars, and I'm mentioning John Horse, right? They had their mighty men in ancient Israel as well, but they weren't the leading tribes that they should have been. I'll put it like that. And it's the same thing in the modern day. All right. So let's go to Deuteronomy 33. Deuteronomy 33 concerning Reuben. It's just one verse in Deuteronomy 33 and 6. It says, "Let Reuben live and not die, and let not his men be few." Right? So why say this specifically? Doesn't Jacob want none of his sons to die? Or rather, this is Moses. Doesn't he want none of the tribes to die? Doesn't he want all of the tribes to be populous and not be few? Of course. He had to specifically say this about Reuben because, first of all, people scoff at the idea that there's going to be 12,000 of the Creek family Indians of the Seminole wake up in the last days, right? According to Revelation 7. That is going to happen, though. People scoff at the idea. But also, we just read here that they were down to 200, right? At that time. But also, over in the east, the Reubenites in the east are the Tasmanians, the Aboriginal Tasmanian people, right? Let's read this right here. And they fulfilled this prophecy concerning let him live and not die, because people said this people group was extinct, all right? And we're going to read this right here. It says, Tasmanian Aboriginal people. The Tasmanian Aboriginal people are an isolate population of Australian Aboriginal people who were cut off from the mainland when a general rise in sea level flooded the Bass Strait about 10,000 years ago. Yeah, okay. Their population upon the arrival of European explorers in the 17th and 18th centuries has been estimated at about 4,000. Historically, the Tasmanian Aboriginal people spoke languages that were unintelligible to mainland Aboriginal peoples, right? They had a completely different language. The island was divided among several peoples who spoke different dialects, each with a delimited hunting territory. So I'm going to jump down to get to the point here. The first permanent white settlement was made in Tasmania in 1803. In 1804, an unprovoked attack by whites on a group of Tasmanian Aboriginal people was the first episode in the Black War. All right, so the Black War was the genocide of these people. The whites treated the Aboriginal people as subhumans, seizing their hunting grounds, depleting their food supply, attacking the women, and killing the men. Attempts by Tasmanian Aboriginal people to resist were met with the superior weaponry and force of the Europeans. Between 1831 and 1835, ostensibly in a final effort at conciliation and to prevent the extermination of approximately 200 Tasmanian Aboriginal people, they were removed to Flinders Island, right, which is islands off the coast of Tasmania, right, just south of Australia. Their social organization and traditional way of life destroyed, subjected to alien disease, and attempts to civilize them, most of them soon died. The death in 1876 of Truganini, a Tasmanian Aboriginal woman who had aided the resettlement on Flinders Island, gave rise to the widely propagated myth that the Aboriginal people of Tasmania had become extinct. All right? So everybody was saying, hey, these people are completely wiped out, these people are gone, but that's a myth. All right? Again, in Deuteronomy 33, he said, let Reuben live and not die, and let not his men be few. All right? They saying it's few, they saying he's dead, but no, they're there. They are there. All right? Nevertheless, Aboriginal identity remained alive in the Furneaux group of islands among the offspring of Aboriginal women and European sealers. The focus for this community became Cape Barren Island, on which in 1881 a reserve was established for half-castes, quote-unquote half-caste, the official designation for mixed-race individuals who were discriminated against even as their Aboriginal identity was negated. The Cape Barren Island Reserve Act of 1912, for example, identified the islanders as a distinct people requiring special regulation by the government, but did not recognize them as Aboriginal people, right? So, I ain't gonna necessarily say that like all the people of Tasmania are Reuben, but when it comes to when it comes to the seed of Israel, you gotta understand it's never gonna be done away with. All right. So this is talking about Northern Kingdom in general, but this really applies to all the tribes, if I'm being honest. But this is what happened with the dispersion of the Israelites. All right, and I believe it's Hosea 9. Let me make sure. Been a second since I read this. Been a minute, I should say. Here we go. So, it says, I'll start with 11 for the context. As for Ephraim, their glory shall fly away like a bird, right? Northern Kingdom. From the birth and from the womb and from the conception. So that's the context, is concerning the womb and concerning conception, all right? Concerning birth and birth rates. Though they bring up their children, yet will I bereave them. There shall not be a man left. Isn't that what they say about the Aboriginal people? No, there wasn't a man left. You know, these women sitting down with these Europeans and whatnot. Yea, woe also to them when I depart from them. All right? Ephraim, as I saw Tyrus, is planted in a pleasant place. But Ephraim shall bring forth his children to the murderer. Right? That's what the women did, right? Bring forth their children to the Europeans. That's what it just said in this article, right? Give them, O Lord, what wilt thou give? Give them a miscarrying womb and dry breasts. Understand that thing, all right? So he said, look, when it comes to the population of the murderers, all right, their children will not survive, as in their seed will not survive. All right. It said, though they bring up their children, yet will I bereave them, that there shall not be a man left. When they bring their children to the murderers, all right, there will not be a man left, but the seed of Israel will prevail. All right. All their wickedness is in Gilgal, for there I hated them. For the wickedness of their doings will I drive them out of my house. I will love them no more. All their princes are revolters. Ephraim is smitten, their root is dried up. They shall bear no fruit. Yea, though they bring forth, yet will I slay even the beloved fruit of their womb. All right. My God will cast them away because they did not hearken unto him. They shall be wanderers among the nations. You see that right there? So that's why you have, instead of in the land of Israel, you have Reuben on one side of the earth in Florida and on the other side of the earth in Tasmania. All right. Wanderers among the nations. All right. And keep that in mind as far as wanderers among the nations. We'll get into that a little later. All right. So from there, that's Reuben. Who's next? Simeon. Simeon is not even mentioned in Deuteronomy 33, but Simeon on the list here, and we talked about this when we was talking about Levi, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. Simeon is the Dominicans, the other half of the island, all right, on the other side of the Haitians. And Simeon, where is he at on here? Is Western Papua, all right, the other side of Papua New Guinea over there in the east, all right. You can tell that by, as it says here, Simeon and Levi are brethren. They're always going to be dwelling together, all right, or at least when it comes to these last days, right, because that's what Genesis 49 is about, the last days, right. In the last days, they'd be dwelling together, all right, because all the tribes are brothers, right. Even half of all the tribes come from Leah, just like Simeon and Levi do, right? So Judah is their brother, Reuben is their brother, and Issachar and Zebulun is their brother, right? But specifically, Simeon and Levi are brethren because they dwell together. Instruments of cruelty are in their habitations. O my soul, come not down to their secret, unto their assembly. My honor, be not thou united, right? So first of all, he said instruments of cruelty, right? They'd be getting up some wickedness, right? Specifically witchcraft and the various forms of it. But he said, be not thou united, all right? They would be together on the same island, on the same land, but they would be split, all right? That's what you see with Papua, split right down the middle, the same way that the Santo Domingo is, all right? With the Dominican Republic on one side, and, or I should say the Isle of Hispaniola is, which you got Haiti on one side and the DR on the other. For in their anger they slew a man, and in their self-will they dig down a wall. Cursed be their anger, for it was fierce, and their wrath, for it was cruel. All right, so you read about that in Genesis 34. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. And that's why the Lord chose, one of the reasons why the Lord chose Levi to be the priest, so he could scatter them in Israel. All right. So from there, that's Simeon. And I got to do because I've already talked about the history of Haiti. I need to do the history of the Dominican Republic as well. And just show, get more in depth into that. But now it's not the time. There's a lot more to cover. So, from there, let's get into Dan. When it comes to Dan, let's go ahead and read Dan. It said, Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. So why would Jacob have to specify Dan is like one of the tribes if he was a tribe? Dan didn't remain as a tribe. In Amos 8, it talks about their fall, and it talks about also, or rather I should say, it neglects to speak of Dan in Revelation 7 when it mentions all the rest of the tribes. All right. So that's why that's why he said Dan shall judge as one of the tribes of Israel, because he's not really one of the tribes, not anymore. But he did have his time with Samson. Samson was a Danite. He was the judge who judged the tribes of Israel. In Amos 8:14, it says, they that swear by the sin of Samaria and say, thy God, O Dan, liveth, and the manor of Beersheba liveth, even they shall fall and never rise up again. So that's the thing about Dan. They fell and never rose up again as a tribe. And they're prophesied to never rise up again as a full tribe. Again, they're not listed in Revelation chapter 7. All right. Specifically with Dan, because this is talking about the city of Dan. Obviously, the city of Dan was inhabited by Danites. That's why they called it Dan. But Jeroboam took men from the city of Dan and made them priests to idols. All right. That wasn't the only city, but that was one of the major ones where he took Danites and made them false priests, right? So that would be one of the reasons why God just shut them down. All right. But concerning Dan, Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. That was fulfilled with Samson. Dan shall be a serpent by the way, an adder in the path that biteth the horse heel, so that his rider fall backward. All right. So Dan was the Carib tribes, where you see the West Indians today. Right. That's where he was, and in the Pacific, he would have been the Marianas Island inhabitants. That's where you see the serpentine style islands, as far as the pattern of the islands are in serpentine shape. All right. Deuteronomy 33. We'll talk about Dan over there real quick as well before we move on. And I'm saving Joseph for the last, just in case y'all were wondering about that. Concerning Dan, where does it say Dan? And of Dan, he said, Dan is a lion's whelp, he shall leap from Bashan. Oftentimes that's what the Caribs would do. They would kill themselves, leap from cliffs, instead of being taken captive, right? So that's one way to ensure that seed was blotted out, is to kill yourself. And, that's what they did, oftentimes. From there, concerning Asher and Naphtali, I'll go ahead and read that. Concerning Asher and Naphtali, and I probably will double back and come back to Naphtali specifically, because there's some things that I want to get into there. I've talked about them briefly as far as Argentina, the history of Argentina. I haven't gone into the history of Chile, but Argentinians and Chileans is what's on the 12 tribes charts, 12 tribes chart of the West. All right, as it says here, let me get back on here. Argentinians and Chileans. Like I said, I may double back and speak more on that as a clip that I place in here. He said, "O Naphtali, satisfied with favor and full with the blessing of the Lord, possess thou the west and the south." Right, so that's the prophecy. The west and the south. All right, so again, I may touch on that at some other time. May come back, as I said. But, and of Asher, he said, "Let Asher be blessed with children. Let him be acceptable to his brethren. Let him dip his foot in oil." All right, so blessed with children. Brazil is very populous, very, very populous in Brazil. Let him be acceptable to his brethren. It says that because Asher is really the only ones out of all the so-called native, so-called Indian tribes. They're the ones who are holding out as far as staying away from civilization. All right, the Amazon tribes, they're the ones who are staying away from civilization. They really want no part in it. All right, so that's why I say let him be acceptable, because we may view them as like feral or uncivilized or whatever. But hey, they can still repent. Come back to the heritage that God has given us. All right. Let him be acceptable to his brethren. Let him dip his foot in oil. Venezuela and even Brazil. Lots of oil there. I believe I've talked about this before with the history of Venezuela, so I'm not going to necessarily dive into it too deep right now. Y'all go back, check out that video. Thy shoes shall be iron and brass, and as thy days, so shall thy strength be. All right, so I'm not necessarily one to go to the Hebrew very often, but I do think it's worth mentioning here that the word for iron in the Hebrew is literally B, or the English equivalent is B-R-Z-L, right? Bet, Resh, Zayin, Lamed. They say it's Barzil, but with no vowels in there, it could just as easily be Brazil, right? Again, those resources are found with Asher, right? Plenteous in resources. And the same thing as far as the 12 tribes in the east. And I will go and talk about Genesis 49 as well. Naphtali is the west and the south. You look at Asia, the west and the south, especially Southeast Asia, where all those Israelites are at. And I'm about to get into that here shortly. The west and the south is Myanmar to Singapore. All right. And Asher would be your Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. All right, right there with Naphtali again, and again, very rich in resources over there. All right, why do you think America was there? Look for that oil. They always look for that oil. All right, but anyway, Genesis 49 concerning Asher and Naphtali. Out of Asher, his bread shall be fat. He shall yield royal dainties. Right, so dainties is like sweet things. Sugarcane in Brazil was the main thing. Main thing in Brazil was sugarcane. All right, and his bread shall be fat. All right, you got a lot of resources again. Naphtali is a hind let loose, the nomadic tribes of the south in South America, as in southern South America. He giveth goodly words. Literally, the word Buenos Aires, right, which is in Argentina, means good airs, good words. All right. So, and again, like I said, more than likely, I'm going to place something like a clip, a video in here concerning Naphtali specifically. But from there, we're already getting pretty close to the 45-minute mark. So what I want to talk about, and this applies, let me first, because you remember what we read about the Tasmanians, right? As far as they were wiped out with disease, and they were wiped out with, slaughter, genocide, but also disease, right? Where did it say that? Because I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to get rid of that Seminole part. This is kind of backtracking a little bit, talking about Reuben, but I'm going to Deuteronomy 28. That's why I want to show you that as well, as far as these people in the islands, because, again, you don't see very many Israelites, very many Hebrew Israelites at all, talk about those in the islands, Pacific Islands, and the Pacific Islands being our people, being the 12 tribes. You don't really see that very often. So I do want to confirm that with Deuteronomy 28. Where does it say? About the disease. Where is it at? Where is it at? I know it. We just read it. Here we go. Their social organization and traditional way of life destroyed. And it says subjected to alien disease and attempts to civilize them, quote unquote. Most of them soon died. Right. So that's the sentence that I wanted to make reference to when going to Deuteronomy 28, because it talks about this in Deuteronomy 28. I don't know what that alien disease is necessarily. Is it the influenza? Is it the typhus? I don't necessarily know what it was that wiped them out. Something worth looking into. But it says also, this is in Deuteronomy 28, verse 61, also every sickness and every plague which is not written in the book of this law, them will the Lord bring upon thee until thou be destroyed. And ye shall be left few in number, whereas ye were as the stars of heaven for multitude, because thou would not obey the voice of the Lord thy God. And it shall come to pass that as the Lord rejoiced over you to do you good and to multiply you, so the Lord will rejoice over you to destroy you and to bring you to naught. And ye shall be plucked from off the land whither thou goest to possess it. Literally plucked off the land of Tasmania and sent to islands, right? So with that in mind, concerning Deuteronomy 28, let's talk about blackbirding, all right? Blackbirding is what it's called, all right? Specifically, let's get into it. Blackbirding was the trade in indentured laborers. Notice what it said, indentured laborers. But keep that in mind. From the Pacific in the 19th and early 20th centuries, in the 18 and 1900s. Or excuse me, yes, 18 and 1900s. It is often described as a form of slavery. Despite the British Slavery Abolition Act in 1833. And, by the way, how the U.S. did the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863. Yet in the late 1800s and early 1900s, you had this trade where indentured laborers were being sent all over the Pacific. Let's see. It said Slavery Abolition Act of 1833 banning slavery throughout the British Empire, including Australia, right? So it should have been illegal to do this, right? The trade frequently relied on coercion, deception, and kidnapping. What's it called when you kidnap someone into indentured servitude? What's that called? Oh yeah, that's called slavery. All right? So they try to use these different terms. Oh, it's not slavery, it's blackbirding. Oh, it's not slavery, it's indentured servitude. There were indentured laborers, not slaves. This is slavery. This is slavery on ships. That's exactly what this is. All right? To transport tens of thousands of indigenous people from the islands in the Pacific Ocean to Australia and other European colonies, often to work on plantations in conditions similar to the Atlantic slave trade. So you had the Atlantic slave trade and the Pacific slave trade. All right. You also had a Trans-Asian slave trade, and that's not necessarily what we're getting into tonight, but you had slave trades all over the world. All right. Trans-Saharan slave trade. All this happened throughout the Middle Ages and colonial periods. All right. These blackbirded people, known as Kanakas or South Sea Islanders, were taken from places such as Papua New Guinea, right? I had mentioned that when talking about Judah. The Solomon Islands, again, when talking about Benjamin. Vanuatu, Niue, Easter Island, the Gilbert Islands, Tuvalu, and the islands of the Bismarck Archipelago. So all of that is in, as it said, the South Pacific Islands, or South Sea Islanders, all right? All that's in the South Pacific. The owners, captains, and crews of the ships involved in the acquisition of these laborers were termed blackbirders, all right? Because they had to use a code word because they weren't supposed to be doing this, all right? Blackbirding ships began operations in the Pacific from the 1840s and continued in some cases into the 1930s. All right? So this was the Great Depression they were doing this. All right? The demand for this kind of cheap labor principally came from sugarcane, cotton, and coffee plantations. Where have I heard all that before? It's the same thing that happened over here in the West. All right? In New South Wales, that's in Australia, Queensland, Australia, Samoa, again, that's in the Pacific, New Caledonia, that's just east of Australia, Fiji, all right, that's even more east in the Pacific, closer to Samoa, Tahiti, all right, and that's in French Polynesia, which again, more east, but it's in the Pacific, and Hawaii. That's, at that time, a U.S. territory, became a U.S. state, all right? But yeah, slavery in Hawaii, all right? No, and I'm going to keep reading, but it doesn't specifically mention it here, but Puerto Ricans were sent on slave ships to Hawaii, by the way. But it's going to say Latin America. In Auckland, that's in New Zealand, a small group of South Sea Islanders worked in flax mills, all right? So notice this time period, 1800s to 1900s, there's industrialization going on. So it's not just the plantations, they were putting them in factories as well. All right? They were putting these slaves in factories as well. Examples of blackbirding outside the South Pacific include the early days of the pearling industry in Western Australia, right? So working on ships, or working in, on reefs and whatnot. At Nickel Bay and Broome, where Aboriginal Australians were blackbirded from the surrounding areas. In Peru, Mexico, Guatemala, and elsewhere in the Americas, blackbirders sought workers for their haciendas and to mine the guano deposits on the Chincha Islands. Right? So that's from everywhere from Australia to Mexico. They had this slave trade going on well into the 1900s. All right. So that's just the general overview. All right. That's just the general overview. All right. In Deuteronomy 28, and the Lord shall scatter thee among all people from the one end of the earth even unto the other, and there, meaning once you get there among all people, thou shalt serve other gods, which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, even wood and stone. You would partake in other religions. All right. What I also want to get to, because this mentions blackbirding in the 19th and 20th centuries, right? This mentions slavery in the Pacific in the 1900s. It started way before then. All right. Slavery in the Pacific. So here's the history of Spanish slavery in the Philippines. All right. So it says Spanish slavery was introduced to the Philippines through the encomienda system, which was instituted throughout the Indies by Nicolas de Ovando, governor of the Indies, from 1502 to 1509. You see it right there. So it started in the 1500s. The Spaniards would go over there to the Philippines and start putting people in slavery. All right. So it said this system rewarded the Spanish conquerors with forced labor from the native peoples. A system of serfdom, the pre-colonial Alapin system, already existed before the islanders were colonized, before the islands were colonized by the Spanish Empire in 1565. But it differed in that groups of native people were not obliged to render forced labors to their superiors. However, rather the Alapin rendered services and labor under a complex system of obligations. All right. So it said, indeed, the etymology indicates that they were originally war captives rendering ransom, right? So they would capture the people and put them in slavery, all right? So it goes on to say that Bartolomé de las Casas wrote about this, so the Spain had to change their laws because of the public outcry. He said, look, y'all treating these people, this ain't Christian, the way y'all treating these people, all right? So they had to change some laws. According to his first-hand accounts, enslaved natives in the Indies were burned alive, starved, forced to work in mines, and the women stopped producing milk because of the hard labor they were forced into. You see that right there. So, and again, I got that book, A Brief Account of the Destruction of the Indies by Bartolomé de las Casas. All right. So it says, while no similarly graphic accounts exist of the abuses endured by the native Filipinos, right? So he didn't visit the Philippines. Bartolomé de las Casas visited the Americas, all right? But he saw what the Spanish were doing and he wrote about it, and it the public outcry forced the Spaniards to change laws, right? Several revolts occurred due to encomienda, even after the passage of the new laws, and continued abuse of the system was recorded, right? So the same way that when slavery was abolished in America, they went to the Pacific, as we were just reading, and abused the system. The same way the British did after after slavery was abolished in their whole empire and commonwealth, the way that they abused the system over there. It's the same way the Spaniards did. They would pass the law to say, hey, look, we're good. We're not going to do this stuff no more. And then they would keep doing it. From the late 16th century to the early 17th century, Spanish soldiers, officials, and settlers often acquired slaves through the pre-existing native Alapin system as a way to skirt around the new laws. Many of these slaves were taken back to Nueva España, where they were called chinos. All right? Nueva España is the Americas, right? So you got a lot of people in Mexico who don't even, well, some of them realize it, but some of them don't, who are descended from these Filipinos who was taken over there as slaves, all right? And vice versa, all right? They would bring Mexicans over into the Philippines and make them work as slaves as well, all right? So it said they were called chinos in Spain. They sent them to Spain as well, as personal servants or slaves of the Spanish crew and passengers of the Manila galleons. In addition, many native Filipinos were also pressed into service as sailors for the galleons, often under harsh conditions. These practices and the indigenous Alapin system were eventually stopped by the mid-1600s after additional royal decrees, which mandated harsh punishments for violations of the laws of the Indies, as well as heavy taxes levied on personal servants brought aboard galleons. Slavery of the people who were not under Spanish jurisdiction, however, was not banned, right? So it says slaves purchased from other slave markets in Southeast Asia passed through Manila and onward to Mexico in the Manila galleons, right? So they just moved from the Philippines and started grabbing slaves from other territories they owned, all right? Native captives of Spain from the Spanish-Moro conflict were also enslaved in this way, right? So that was in the Philippines. Conversely, Filipinos who were subjects of Spain were often enslaved by Moro pirates and raiders. They were either integrated as slaves into the Moro sultanates, ransomed to relatives, or sold further onto the Dutch East Indies, all right, and the Chinese, right? So, again, passing of slaves, when it says the Dutch East Indies, that would be your Myanmar and Singapore. So all that is connected as far as the slavery that went on all throughout Southeast Asia and the Pacific, all right, and the Americas. All of that is connected, all right? And it also says the Moabites. And as I described when going into, I think it was last week, when going into how the Filipinos are Issachar, they have always, at least since colonial time periods, had been burdened on both sides between Esau and the Chinese, all right? Esau and the Moabites, all right? Became a servant under tribute, right? So, from there, because we're done with the Tasmanian people, blackbirding, and even this history here. So we're on to Joseph. I'll close out talking about Joseph. But I just want to read here in Deuteronomy 28:68. And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again, meaning slavery again, with ships. The people who went on slave ships, whether it be the Trans-Asian slave trade, the transatlantic slave trade, the Trans-Pacific slave trade, regardless, that's Israelites, all right? And I'll just show y'all real quick this map that I just found concerning the Trans-Pacific slave trade and how, or really just slave trade in general, all over the world, all over the world. It's from a top view down. This map is actually pretty interesting. And it shows all the different areas. So this is the, as it shows here, how, and this is specifically the Trans-Pacific slave trade, because it doesn't show any of the transatlantic slave trade, but I got a different map for that. As you see here, you had silver trade and silver mines, you had all the different empires, and they would take people from all these different areas. You see, they would take people from the Philippines and ship them west and east. They would take people from the Americas, ship them west and east, and they obviously they would start in Europe and ship slaves to Europe as well, and also into India, as we're about to get into here shortly, throughout the Ottoman Empire as well. So let's get out of this. Yeah, so as y'all can see, all over the world, that's the route that they went, all over the world. I just kind of zoomed out a little bit so y'all can see it a little better. All over the world, all over the world. So I'll come back to this. As I just read a while ago, among all people, scatter thee among all people. That's what happened to the Israelites. All right. And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee, thou shalt see it no more again. And there, once you get off the ships, ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, or sometimes they'll call you indentured laborers. And no man shall buy you, meaning nobody's going to get you out of that. Nobody's going to buy you out of slavery, as was custom in ancient Israel to do. All right, so we can get out of that. We can get out of that. So let's deal with Joseph real quick. So he said Joseph, obviously Joseph being the father of Ephraim and Manasseh, and we'll get into that here shortly. Joseph is a fruitful bow, even a fruitful bow by a well, meaning by water, all right, whose branches run over the wall. So branches in this context is getting into his seed, right? Run over the wall as into the enemy, as we read in Hosea 9, all right? Gives his seed to the enemy. The archers have sorely grieved him and shot at him and hated him, right? The enemy come against Joseph. But his bow abode in strength, and the arms of his hands were made strong by the hands of the mighty God of Jacob. From thence is the shepherd, the stone of Israel. All right. So, as I said, the archers have sorely grieved him. They hated him. They hated Joseph. All right. Let's go ahead and look at the 12 tribes chart. Ephraim and Manasseh is your so-called Puerto Ricans and Cubans, all right, respectively. And just one example of that, I want to get the terminology right, where it said, but his bow abode in strength, the arms of his hands were made strong by the hands of the mighty God of Jacob, is how the CIA tried to take out Castro so many times. But they couldn't. Why? Because that blessing of Joseph was on it. And God didn't want him to die for whatever reason, right? He wanted to show his power, that, hey, Esau don't hold all the power. God holds all the power. As you can see here, the 12 tribes chart always shows Puerto Ricans and Cubans as the Ephraimites and the Manassites, all right? And in the east, let me point this out, Manasseh is going to be your Kiwi or New Zealanders, all right? And the Ephraimites will be your Micronesians or your Hawaii to Palau, right? Those northern Pacific Islands, all right? Those northern Pacific Islands, all right? So, from there, let's get back to Genesis 49. It said, even by the God of thy father who shall help thee, and by the Almighty who shall bless thee with the blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lieth under. The deep that lieth under, blessings of the breast and of the womb. All right? Meaning populous, meaning there are populous people. All right? And the deep that lieth under. And I believe it's actually Deuteronomy 33 that says the deep beneath, the couch beneath. Or I don't know if it says couch, but the deep beneath. So I'll get Deuteronomy 33 here shortly. But it says, the blessings of thy father have prevailed above the blessings of my progenitors unto the utmost bound of the everlasting hills. They shall be on the head of Joseph and on the crown of the head of him that was separate from his brethren. All right. So specifically, the children of Joseph, which are the Ephraimites and the Manassites, are going to be very blessed. All right. Very populous and very blessed. All right. In Deuteronomy 33, concerning Joseph. All right. Where are we at? Here we go. And of Joseph, he said, blessed of the Lord be his land, for the precious things of heaven, for the dew, and for the deep that coucheth beneath. Right? For the deep that coucheth beneath. That's what he said. So the deep that coucheth beneath, let me just show that real quick. So this is Puerto Rico. This is what Puerto Rico looks like. I guess it's a topographical map. Somewhat. So notice how when you look north of Puerto Rico, above Puerto Rico, is shallow waters, and it gradually goes to the deep, right? It's shallow waters, shallow beaches, then it gradually goes to the deep, as you would expect, as it usually does. But you look at beneath, or the south of Puerto Rico, and it just drops off. After them beaches, it just drops off. It don't gradually, it drops off. It's the deep that coucheth beneath Joseph. All right? So I just wanted to demonstrate that real quick. Also, on the in the Pacific, Guam is in that line. It's part of Micronesia. Guam is actually just north of the Marianas Trench, which is the deepest part on the entire earth. All right? So that's the deep that coucheth beneath. And for the precious fruits brought forth by the sun, and for the precious things put forth by the moon, and for the chief things of the ancient mountains, and for the precious things of the lasting hills. And I've talked about this before as far as Northern Kingdom in general, who was led by Joseph, right? Joseph and his companions, right? Led by Ephraim specifically. They were, and I guess I could specifically say Manasseh and Ephraim as far as this prophecy applying to the ancient mountains, the lasting hills. When especially colonizers, right? When somebody would attack, they would run to the hills, the mountains. They would flee to the mountains to escape these attacked by colonizers, all right? So again, the ancient mountains, the lasting hills. And for the precious things of the earth and the fullness thereof, and for the goodwill of him that dwelt in the bush, let the blessing come upon the head of Joseph, and upon the top of the head of him that was separated from his brethren. All right, so he's pretty much reiterating the same blessing that Jacob gave. All right. His glory is like the firstling of his bullock, and his horns are like the horns of unicorns. Powerful. With them he shall push the people together to the ends of the earth. He will push the people to the ends of the earth. All right. So no doubt about it that I've talked about it pretty much over the past couple weeks, is that that voyage who brought the people over here to the west, right, that it mentions in 2nd Ezra 13, right, the voyage of the so-called Indians, right, no doubt that was more than likely led by the chiefs and maybe even the king's seed, the Samaritans of Ephraim and Manasseh, no doubt, sure. But the ends of the earth, there's more to it than that, all right? As far as the ends of the earth, New Zealand is at the end of the earth, all right? It's like a different planet, all right? It's like the southernmost point, all right? But also, he shall push the people together to the ends of the earth. And they are the 10,000s of Ephraim, and they are the thousands of Manasseh. All right. So first of all, I got this pulled up here, the Puerto Rican population, because this is the 12 tribes chart that we all, as far as One West camps, all have. All right. As far as the Puerto Ricans are the Ephraimites, and the Cubans are the Manassites, right? The Cubans have about 10 million people. 10, 11, you could say 12 million people. Even that, 10, 11 is probably more accurate, right? When it comes to the Puerto Rican population, there's actually more Puerto Ricans residing in America than there are on the island of Puerto Rico, right? So it said Puerto Ricans residing on the mainland reach 5.8 million, And it said Puerto Rico's population at 3.2 million, right? So that's around 9 million, right? So even when looking at Puerto Rican population versus Cuban population, so let me look at like Cuban population. Let me pull this up. First of all, Cuban population in general, it's around 11 million, right? 11 million, according to the census data, which is going to be a little off, but that's pretty close, right? We'll work with that number. So let's deal with Cuban population in the United States. How much is that? Around 2.5. Around 2.5, right? So that would put the Cuban population, the Manassites, more than the Ephraimites. So then how can this prophecy be true if it's just talking about Puerto Ricans and Cubans, right? So Puerto Ricans and Cubans, Puerto Ricans are about 9 million, maybe 10. Cubans are around 13, 14, right? Million people. Yet the prophecy says 10,000s of Ephraim compared to the thousands of Manasseh. All right, so there should be more Ephraimites than there are Manassites, right? And even when looking at the general 12 tribes in the east, the Micronesians only make about 2 to 5, depending on how you count it. Whereas New Zealanders are pretty much the same, 2 to 5. When counting like who would be, I'm saying 2 to 5 because I'm also taking in account that there's going to be Edomites there as well, right? Specifically in the Pacific. There's going to be tares among the wheat always, but specifically in the Pacific, in a lot of these places, there are more Edomites than there are Israelites, supposedly. So I'm saying 2 to 5, right? Could be anywhere in there for both, for the Micronesians and for the Kiwis, the New Zealanders, 2 to 5. So that would still leave the Manassite population more than the Ephraimite population, all right? In come the Pashtuns, or Pashtuns. They got a lot of different names. So the Pashtuns, the Pakhtuns, the Pukhtuns, the Pathans. All right. I also want to get in Genesis, I think it's 47, 8, 7, concerning the blessing of Ephraim versus the blessing of Manasseh. So Jacob, let's see. Might be in 48. Might be in Genesis 48. Y'all forgive me. Yes, Genesis 48. So this is the previous chapter to all the rest of the blessings. And he said, and Joseph said unto his father, these are my sons, whom God hath given me in this place. He said, bring them, I pray thee, unto me, and I will bless them. Right? So Jacob's going to bless Joseph's sons. All right? And Joseph brought them out from between his knees, and he bowed himself with his face to the earth, and Joseph took them both, Ephraim in his right hand towards Israel's left hand, and Manasseh in his left hand towards Israel's right hand, and brought them near unto him. Right? So Ephraim is the younger, Manasseh is the older. Joseph wants Jacob to bless the elder son more than the younger son. All right? And Israel stretched his right hand and laid it upon Ephraim's head, who was the younger, and his left hand upon Manasseh's head, guiding his hands wittingly, for Manasseh was the firstborn. All right? So yeah, I'll just go ahead and read. And he blessed Joseph and said, God, before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac did walk, the God which fed me all my life long unto this day, the angel which redeemed me from all evil, bless the lads, and let my name be named on them, and the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. Right? So he's blessing both of them equally at that point. Even though his right hand's on Ephraim's head, left hand on Manasseh's head. Right? He switched up the hands. And when Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand upon the head of Ephraim, it displeased him. And he held up his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head unto Manasseh's head. And Joseph said unto his father, not so, my father, for this is the firstborn, put thy right hand upon his head. And his father refused and said, I know it, my son, I know it. He also shall become a people, and he also shall be great. But truly his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his seed shall become a multitude of nations. Right? So, first of all, if you're just saying just the Puerto Ricans are Ephraimites, that's not a multitude of nations. All right? So then, that's why I say, hey, these Northern Kingdom, specifically these Northern Kingdom Islanders, all these Micronesians, that's Ephraim. All right? And part of it has to do with the fact that the Puerto Ricans were sent as slaves to Hawaii. All right? And the U.S. took over those Micronesian nations the same way they took over Puerto Rico, right, as a U.S. territory, so that he could try to keep Ephraim in check, right? But also the multitude of nations, even when adding the islanders in the Pacific and the Caribbean islanders, right, the Puerto Ricans and the Cubans, Ephraim is still not more than Manasseh, all right? But he blessed in that day and saying, and thee shall Israel bless, saying, God make thee as Ephraim and as Manasseh. And he said Ephraim before Manasseh. Right? So understand that. In walk the Pashtuns. All right? Understand this. I'm going to read down. It says the Pashtuns, or Pakhtuns, are an Iranic ethnic group, primarily residing in southern and eastern Afghanistan and northwestern Pakistan. All right? So they're mainly in Afghanistan and Pakistan. But you see it everywhere else they are. They're in the U.S., in Iran, UAE, UK, Germany, Australia, Canada, Tajikistan, which is over there in the Islamic countries, obviously. And it goes on and it goes on. All right. So comprising from 60 to 70 million people, between 350 to 400 tribes. All right. With further having more sub-tribes. All right. So, let me jump down to history and origins. All right. It says the ethnogenesis of the Pashtun ethnic group is unclear. All right. So let's jump down. Some people say they're Greeks. Some people say they're Hephthalites, which are Turkish. All right. So, and then you go down, it says anthropology and oral traditions, theory of Pashtun descent from Israelites. Some anthropologists lend credence to the oral traditions of the Pashtun tribes themselves, meaning they themselves are saying this. For example, according to the Encyclopedia of Islam, oh, come on now. I'm not trying to go to wherever it's trying to send me right now. All right. The theory of Pashtun descent from Israelites is traced to Namat Allah al-Hawari, who compiled a history of Khan-e-Jahan Lodi in the region of Mughal Emperor Jahangir in the 17th century. The 13th century Tabaqat-e-Nasiri discusses the settlement of immigrant Bani Israel at the end of the 8th century CE, right? So this is in the Middle Ages. They didn't even get over here until the Middle Ages. All right, they didn't get to that region until the Middle Ages. All right. It says in the Ghor region of Afghanistan, settlement attested by Jewish inscriptions in Ghor. Right, so they found Byzantine writings and modern Hebrew writings, right, Masoretic writings, over in that region that date back to that time period. All right, in the Middle Ages. Historian Andre Wink suggests that the story may contain a clue to the remarkable theory of the Jewish origin of some of the Afghan tribes, which is persistently advocated in the Persian Afghan chronicles. These references to Bani Israel agree with the commonly held view by Pashtuns that when the 12 tribes of Israel were dispersed, the tribe of Joseph, among other Hebrew tribes, settled in the Afghanistan region. All right. Now, as far as other Hebrew tribes, I'm not even getting into that necessarily. There may be a remnant of some of the other tribes there, but specifically, we're going to keep reading as it says the tribe of Joseph. This oral tradition is widespread among the Pashtun tribes. This is what they themselves believe. All right, they have these other theories of where these people come from. Oh, where do these people come from? If you ask the people themselves, they'll tell you we're Israelites. All right. There have been many legends over the centuries of descent from the 10 lost tribes after groups converted to Christianity and Islam. Hence, the tribal name Yusufzai in Pashto translates to the son of Joseph. All right? Literally, there's tribes that call themselves the sons of Joseph. All right. This is 60, 70 million people. And again, tares are always going to be among the wheat. I'm not saying they're all Israelites, all these tribes, because it's a mix of a bunch of different tribes. Some of these could be some of the Medes that they were living among, could be some of the Ishmaelites that took over the whole Middle East, right? Could be some of the children of Joktan that were originally over there, right? But when talking about, as we just went into, the seed of Israel always prevails, all right? When it comes to dwelling among the heathen, the seed of Israel always prevails. Let's see. A similar story is told by many historians, including the 14th century. No, that's good. That's good. And it's just talking about Islamic legends, which may or may not have credence. All right. So I'll jump down. Let's see. It's not even saying. Let's see. Yeah, so it's not even saying the interesting part of this part right here. Oh, no, yeah, it does, excuse me. One conflicting issue in the belief that the Pashtuns descend from the Israelites is that the 10 lost tribes were exiled by the ruler of Assyria, right? Shalmaneser V. We've read this over the past couple of weeks. It says this in 2nd Ezra 13. While Maghzan-e Afghani says they were permitted by the ruler to go east to Afghanistan. That's a lie. They were not permitted to do anything. They were slaves in Assyria, all right? This inconsistency can be explained by the fact that Persia acquired the lands of the ancient Assyrian Empire when it conquered the empire of the Medes and Chaldean Babylonia. There we go. So, and that's what I've been saying the whole time as far as when talking about 2nd Ezra 13. All right, the Israelites, as far as the northern kingdom, was in the cities of the Medes, serving the ancient Assyrians, mixing with the Medes. All right, until Cyrus came up and freed the Israelites. Freed the Jews. All right, you read that in Ezra chapter 1, he freed the Jews, but that decree was for all the Israelites. All right, the Jews, meaning Judah, went back, whereas the northern kingdom did not. All right, so let's see. Which had conquered Assyria decades earlier. Right. So, I'll touch on Bnei Menashe real quick as well. Because again, they pushed the people to the ends of the earth. All right? And yeah, let me do this real quick. I'll just do this over here. Bnei Menashe, where are we at? Bnei Menashe, thank you. The Bnei Menashe people, because remember when it said the Pashtuns, there's 60 to 70 million people, all right? So the Bnei Menashe people, where was I reading this at? Maybe on Wikipedia, and I don't necessarily like to use Wikipedia all the time, but it's just a compilation of a bunch of different sources. So Bnei Menashe, known as the Shenlong in India, all right, is a community of Indian Jews from various Tibeto-Burmese ethnic groups, all right, from the border of India and Burma, who claim descent from one of the lost tribes of Israel, allegedly based on the Hamar belief in an ancestor named Manmasi. Some of them have adopted Judaism. The community has around 10,000 members, all right. So let's see, the province that they're in India, or the provinces. Let's see. The provinces, I don't like using AI, but I will. Manipur and Mizoram, I want to point these out real quick. Manipur in India. Let me zoom out. Can I zoom out? Well, let me zoom out. Damn it. Yeah, zoom out. Okay, so Manipur is right over here by Myanmar, by Bangladesh, south of Bhutan, but around the same region. And Mizoram is right over there in the same region. All right. So yeah, just south of Manipur is Mizoram. You see Manipur is right there. So again, right there next to Bangladesh in that region. And there's a lot of people over in that region, right? Because India is like packed with people, all right, from the west to the east. But again, tares among the wheat, wheat among the tares. We know according to prophecy, there's going to be more Ephraimites than Manassites, right? So the Ephraimites anywhere into the let's say tens of millions, whereas Manasseh would be in the millions, right? Or lesser tens of millions. I just want to show this on the map real quick. Because where the Pashtuns are is like right over here, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India, right? Whereas the Manassites are like over here, right? Again, pushing the people to the ends of the earth, right? They're the ones who had pushed the rest of the tribes over in this region, right? Because most of the Pacific Islands were not even inhabited until the Middle Ages, right? And that's when we see this people pop up in the Middle East that claim descent of Israelites, right? So they did, as far as the curses are concerned, I was looking into it, and yeah, even their origins as far as like were them being slaves in Iran, right? So they faced the curses. As far as like throughout the years, I can't tell you. I have to do more research, but they claim to be Israelites. I'm not going to say that they're not, and it wouldn't make sense prophetically for them to be, right? They're the 10,000s of Ephraim, and they are the thousands of Manasseh, as in Ephraim is more fruitful than Manasseh. Whereas if you just look at the 12 tribes chart, we don't see that, all right? So, with that, I'll read Deuteronomy 33, the end of it. Talking about the excellency of Israel. We'll close out here with Mark 14 afterwards. All right. There is none like unto the God of Jeshurun, who rideth upon the heaven in thy help, and in his excellency on the sky. And see, that's what we're going to see when Christ returns. He's going to be coming from the sky, riding upon the heaven to help his people, Jeshurun. The eternal God is thy refuge, and underneath are the everlasting arms. He shall thrust out the enemy from before thee, and shall say, destroy them. Israel then shall dwell in safety alone. The fountain of Jacob shall be upon a land of corn and wine. Also his heavens shall drop down dew. Happy art thou, O Israel. Who is like unto thee, O people saved by the Lord? The shield of thy help, and who is the sword of thy excellency? And thine enemies shall be found liars unto thee, right? They're saying we're this, we're that, when no, we're the Israelites. They're saying we're black, Latino, Native American, Pacific Islander, this, that, Pashtun. No, we're the Israelites, all right? And as far as the war with the Pashtuns on the 12 tribes of Israel in the east, let me show y'all this real quick. Because, yeah, I'm the one who made up this flyer right here, this chart. But down here at the bottom, asterisk, also scattered throughout Africa, Asia, which the Middle East is in Asia, and Europe. So they're on there. They're on there. That's the dispersed. That's the dispersed in the lands, right? But they fulfill the prophecy. That's why I felt it important to mention them, because there's more Pashtuns than there are Puerto Ricans and Cubans combined, right? So it was important to mention them, all right? And thine enemies shall be found liars to thee, and thou shalt tread upon their high places. Alrighty then. That's the prophecy. The Lord's going to deliver us as one people of the various tribes. So from there, I'll go ahead and close it out with Mark 14. And yeah, I do plan on turning all this into like one 6-7 hour video with clips and images spliced in throughout. So y'all watch out for that one, because I'm going to upload it to the page. The uploading and the rendering process is going to take days probably. So y'all be on the lookout for that one. Mark 14, starting with verse 3. And being in Bethany, in the house of Simon the leper, as he sat at meat, there came a woman having an alabaster box of ointment of spikenard very precious. And she brake the box and poured it on his head, And there were some that had indignation within themselves, and said, Why was this waste of the ointment made? For it might have been sold for more than 300 pence, and have been given to the poor. And they murmured against her. And Jesus said, Let her alone. Why trouble ye her? She hath wrought a good work on me. For ye have the poor with you always. And whensoever ye will, you may do them good. But me ye have not always. She hath done what she could. She has come aforehand to anoint my body to the burying. Verily I say unto you, wheresoever this gospel shall be preached throughout the whole world, this also that she hath done shall be spoken of for a memorial of her. So, all praises to the Most High for that sister doing a wonderful thing for our Lord. All praises to the Most High that He let me get this out to y'all. Lord's will, y'all have a little bit more understanding about the 12 tribes. And like I said, y'all be on the lookout for that full video, because it's going to be like 6-7 hours long. I'm going to try to be splicing things, especially here at the end, because I want to throw in some clips that I've seen about the Black Seminoles, and I want to throw in some clips about the, what else was I talking about putting in? I'll remember at some point. Oh yeah, about the Naphtalites. I gotta bring that back. But anyway, hope y'all learned something. Shalom, and let God be magnified.